Hey there, welcome back to Soup's Secret Show. If this is your first time watching, The Secret Show is a video podcast where I talk about whatever's been on my mind lately, answer your questions, and do deep dives on topics in the dirt bike world that are just a little too specific for the YouTube algorithm. Quick heads up, this episode was originally posted on Patreon. If you want to get future episodes a week early and completely ad-free, you can join for just $2 a month using the first link in the description. Today's episode kicks off with a weird superstition I have about my 125 and why I'm kind of thinking about selling it. We're also talking Redbud highlights, Shimoda's win, Yamaha's struggles, and Ducati's wild Desmo concept. And of course, I'm answering a ton of your questions, like my take on eyelashes on four-wheelers, if dual sports are worth the compromise, and what makes a real dirt bike anyway. Just so you know, if you want to skip around, I've got timestamps for each segment listed in the show notes below. Here's some quick housekeeping before we get started. First off, I want to thank you for checking out The Secret Show. It really helps keep the channel alive so I can keep bringing you the stuff you want to see. Aside from subscribing to this show, there are a few other ways you can support Soup Moto. First off, Soup Moto t-shirts are now on sale. They're super high quality, union-made shirts printed by Commonwealth Press right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SoupMoto_summer25, which you can also find below, for 15% off. If you can't afford to buy merch right now, don't sweat it, because just by watching and engaging with my videos over on YouTube, that helps a ton. But if you do feel like donating directly, you can actually do so straight through YouTube by clicking the thanks button below the videos over there. I'm also a motorsport affiliate, so if you have a bunch of bike parts or riding gear or accessories you were already planning on buying, you can click the motorsport link in the description below, fill up your cart with whatever you want, and when you purchase, I'll earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. And for those of you outside the US who have told me that the motorsport links don't work, you can actually do the same thing through Amazon. If you click my gear recommendations link below, and then you click on the menu of that website, there will be a tab titled EU version. You'll be able to purchase my recommended gear through those links, plus anything else you want to buy on Amazon, and I'll also get a small commission from that. If your action camera footage still looks like garbage, it's because you're not using one of these. I use this thing on like every single ride. It's called the Dango Design Gripper Chin Mount. It's different than some of the other ones that just attach straight to the front of your helmet. This one has this like really strong claw, easily attaches to your helmet, but it doesn't detach easily at all. It's really sturdy, it stays on strong, it has this spring to kind of prevent that like vibration. If you're not using a chin mount, you really got to get on it for dirt bike riding. It's the best point of view out there. All the other mounts don't hold a candle to it. This just looks the most realistic to what you see with your eyes. Another thing I really like about this specific chin mount is that ability to be able to just quickly detach it from your helmet on the fly, and then you can just hold it like a regular camera and film your buddies going past or whatever. I've even heard of people hooking them onto like a tree branch and then you film yourself riding past. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with this. If you're interested and you want to get yourself one, you can find it through the link in my bio, and you can use code SoupMoto10 to get 10% off. Also, I have a discount code for all Cardo products, so if you're already thinking about buying a Cardo to listen to music while you ride or to chat with your buddies during those long enduro loops, you can use code SOUP, S-O-U-P, at checkout for 10% off. And one last thing, I also have an affiliate link for that drone that I've been kind of testing out. I haven't done a full in-depth review on it yet, but if you do want to help me out and you were thinking about buying the Hover Air drone anyway, that link will be down in the description below. Without further ado, let's dive on in to The Secret Show. So today we're playing on Fluke Creations Monster Mountain track, which is on the game MX Bikes, if you don't know. And I'll play this throughout most of the episode today, but I'm also going to be looking at, my web browser. We're going to take a look into the Ducati bike and that sort of thing. So it won't be all MX bikes, but that's besides the point. The first thing I want to talk about is why I'm feeling a little bit superstitious about my 125. Now, I got the 125, my YZ 125 two-stroke when I was pretty young. It's a 2012 YZ 125. And, I really liked it when I was younger because first off, I was coming from an 85 two-stroke. So it was, moving up to a full-size bike, but it's still a two-stroke that I'm familiar with, and it has a lot more power than the 85. But it actually fit me better because I was getting bigger. And like I said, I was only really riding motocross, which that bike performs really well at. That's what it's designed to do. So I definitely liked that bike quite a bit. But I eventually kind of had some incidences that led me to start questioning it or becoming a little superstitious of it. And I didn't really fully realize it until like this past year. But looking back in hindsight, I think the first thing that sort of started my superstition of this bike is I had a pretty bad crash, which I talked about in, I believe it was episode 1 or 2 of The Secret Show, where I crashed my 125 and got a concussion. I took a pretty hard slam and got a concussion. I don't know. It was a bit of a scary crash. And then I did like my first race on this bike, or maybe it was my second race. I don't know. It was at Pleasure Valley. And I got like dead last. And I was coming around the last turn down into this big valley, and the same sort of crash whenever I got my concussion happened again. I like swapped one way and then back the other way and slammed onto the ground really hard. And I didn't really get like injured physically that crash, but everyone there was like watching me because I was the last person on the track. And it was really embarrassing for me. And the bike took quite a bit of damage as well. I think the radiators were all twisted up, had to get those repaired, and just it was all twisted. The subframe is bent, I believe, from that crash. It's still to this day. So yeah, just I had some pretty hard crashes. Now moving, ahead in time, whenever I, got back into riding recently, and I made my list of all the races that I wanted to do, which I since have kind of abandoned. But over the winter, I made this list of all these races I wanted to do. And I wanted to get my bike prepped for the races because I was doing a mix of motocross, hare scrambles, cross country, and enduro. I wanted to sort of set my bike up in a way where it would be okay at everything. And I didn't really want to do the CRF 250F because that bike, while it's great for a lot of the riding that I normally do, it isn't really capable for motocross riding just because it's not designed for that. It doesn't have enough power to hit the jumps, and it also, the suspension is just not ideal at all for motocross racing. Matter of fact, I actually just recently busted a rear spoke, because I was riding it on my CRF on the motocross track, and I have still not upgraded the suspension, so it's just stock suspension. And I believe I busted the spoke because I've been jumping it as though it has capable suspension, but just flat landing it and bottoming the suspension out. So that's obviously not very good for your spokes and other components of the bike. So anyway, that's why I was going to choose to use my YZ125. But my dad also has a 125, and it has a FMF gnarly pipe, I believe. It has V-Force reeds, and I think it has some other mods that give it a little more like low-end power, which I actually thought would be better suited for the woods. But it's a 2005, so when I talk to my dad's friend, who is kind of like the guy I get to do all the work on my bikes because I'm not much of a mechanic, he was saying like, well, why? Because originally I wanted to use my dad's bike for these races and not mine. Partially because I was feeling a little bit superstitious about it, but we'll get into that. So anyway, I told him like, hey, I think I want to redo the suspension on my dad's bike and sort of get it ready to go as like a hybrid bike for both off-road, since it had some of those components that made the power deliver a bit more linear. Like I said, his bike was basically identical to mine, but it's a 2005, or maybe it's a 2006 YZ125. But anyway, so the mechanic, my dad's buddy, he said to me like, well, wait, why don't you run the 2012? Because it has better suspension. So apparently they upgraded the suspension between those years, and my bike, although I thought it was kind of identical, it actually has better suspension components than my dad's. So I'm like, well, the reason is because, you know, it has these other mods, which I guess I could just transfer over to mine, that make the power a little more linear, but also I just kind of get bad vibes from my 125. And that was like the first time I realized, oh man, I got a little bit of like bad feelings about this bike. And I thought back on it, and I think that's why. Now, I ended up, you know, listening to him, and I got the suspension done on my bike because it did have the better suspension components, which that makes sense to me. So I got it all done, and I got it put back together and stuff, and it's okay, but I can really tell for the type of riding I'm doing, it's not the right fit. And it's just been kind of annoying me lately, and I think it's a combo of a lot of things. So for one, I think it's just not the right bike for the type of riding I've been doing. That narrow power band just does not lend itself well to like trail riding, enduro riding at all. I just wasn't feeling at home on it. Another thing is the bad vibes from just crashing it a lot. So I think I've gotten in my head about it a little bit, and to me, that bike feels like, I don't know, no bueno, if that makes sense. I guess subconsciously I'm like a little worried that I'll have some big get off, kind of like I did in the past on that bike again. Whether that's warranted or it's just a superstition, I don't know, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. And then thirdly, it keeps breaking. So I just had a coolant leak, and I tried to replace the gasket on the water pump because that's like the easiest part to fix. And I figure, okay, well, it's leaking, maybe it's the gasket. So I replaced that. Nope, that wasn't the problem. It's still leaking. So it must be like the impeller or the bearings or something inside the water pump, which all that stuff came with the repair kit that I got. But from everything I've researched online, you have to like split the cases of the engine to get access to those like impeller pieces. And I am not much of a mechanic, and I don't really feel like doing that, although I guess I'm gonna have to. So that kind of led me to think, well, I kind of want a new bike anyway, and I'm not really vibing with my 125. Plus I have all these bad feelings about it, and I think I just want to sell it. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, if I'm going to sell it as is or try to repair it at least and then sell it. But in other news, just as a quick side note, if any of you are going to be going to Mid-Ohio at the end of this month for the AMA Vintage Motorcycle Days, first off, if you've never heard of it, look it up. It's really awesome. But if you have heard of it and you're going to be going, I will be there. And as long as all goes well, I will be racing my buddy's, I believe it's a 1998 KX250 two-stroke in the hare scramble race on, I think it's Friday. And then depending on how that goes, I may also race on Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember which day that class would be, but on the motocross track. So if you're going to be at Mid-Ohio, you know, DM me or something on Instagram. Come say hi if you see me. But yeah, anyway, yeah, so because of that, because of all the bad vibes about my 125, I was actually going to race that bike since it's technically a vintage bike. It's a 2012. But now I don't think I'm going to be racing that. And I'm excited to race my buddy's KX250 because I think that'll be a little more suited for what I'm doing here. But talking about superstitions, I kind of wanted to discuss a little bit of other riders' superstitions. So the reason I got me thinking about this, because I was superstitious about my 125, but I also saw a video not too long ago, I think it was on Instagram, of like either Justin Cooper or Cooper Webb, one of the two. They got a brand new helmet, as factory pros do, and before they put it on, they like gently dropped it on the ground from like a couple inches above the floor. Yeah, they like gently dropped the helmet on the ground, and I was like scratching my head. I'm like, why are they doing that? And then I thought a little more about it and like read some of the comments, and they're like, oh, it's a superstition. Like if you drop your helmet, a brand new helmet on the ground, it'll give it like a first little scuff or a first little fall, and then that will kind of like protect you from getting in a crash like in the future. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it made me think I kind of want to know what other superstitions people have. So I looked it up, and there's a Reddit post from like 9 years ago. It's on the motorcycle forum, not specifically for dirt bikes, but there's some for dirt bikes on there. So I just want to like check them out and read through them. So let's see what they have. So someone else on an article I read also said like wearing a certain color of underwear or something like that, which I've definitely heard before. I actually used to have a pair of like Ethica underwear with these like trees on them that I used to always wear when I'd ride, but I don't think it was like a superstition thing. I think it was just like that's what I had for riding, and that's what was comfortable to me. Someone else on Reddit said, only one, listen to that little voice in your head. The superstitious part is that if I don't listen, something bad will happen. I kind of agree with that. Yeah. And another person said, if you have a bad feeling about something, generally best to not do it. I don't know if it's superstition or there's some logical reason behind it, but bad things often happen after I do something that I had a bad feeling about. I agree with that. It's like go with your gut. I used to actually like be into scuba diving and like cave diving. I've mentioned it here and there on my channel every once in a while, but there was this one time when we were going to go wreck diving, and I saw the weather was supposed to be particularly bad, and I just wasn't getting a good feeling about it, and I ended up canceling the dive and not going. And I ended up talking to a very experienced cave diver after that, and he was actually my cave diving instructor. But I was talking to him, and he said, I fully believe that if you had a bad feeling about that, if you would have gone on that wreck dive, you probably would have had something bad happen to you. So yeah, I don't know if it's superstition, but I think going with your gut, if you do feel a little weird about something, is definitely the right call for sure. I'm also seeing a lot of people mention like putting their left glove on their hand before their right glove, or same with boots, like putting your left boot on before your right boot. I've never heard of that. I don't do that. Someone else said they do it with the right. Someone also said they always mount the bike from the left side. I actually used to do that a lot, and I think it just became habit because the Kickstarter is usually on the right side. So if you mount the bike from the left, your left foot is on the ground and your right foot's kind of already like hovering above the Kickstarter. So I think that just makes sense to me. I always get on the bike from the left usually. I mean, obviously if I'm in like a weird position, I don't do that, but like on a hill or something. Someone else said it's bad luck to ride with race replica livery. Listen to your gut if something feels off, back off. So they're talking about like race replica. My helmet is actually a very old, like, what's it called? Not HRC, but the old Suzuki team that Ken Roxon was on. I got the Brock Tickle replica helmet. I won it at a race, and that's my helmet. I still use to this day, so hopefully that's not a bad vibe or whatever, but I guess some people say that. And then I also saw here someone said I always put my left boot on first because Jeremy McGrath said he did that for luck, and I saw it in an interview when I was a kid. So I guess that's where it's coming from. I'm not quite sure. Someone else says, shake the bike to see if I have enough gas. I definitely do that. Sometimes you're just too lazy. You don't want to open up the gas cap. So you just shake it. And if you can hear it sloshing around, you can kind of tell how much is in there. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if those are like major superstitions or whatnot, but just thought it was kind of interesting. If you guys have any like pre-ride or during ride superstitions, or you just feel a little weird about a certain bike, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below on that matter. Okay, next topic, I want to talk a little bit about Redbud. I actually just watched it over on Peacock. In the first episode of this secret show, I accidentally, well, I didn't accidentally, I did it on purpose. I played an Instagram clip of Lance Kobush pulling the whole shot on Deegan. And even though that was just an Instagram clip, like a recording of the broadcast, Feld, I believe it was Feld, still gave me a copyright strike, even though my video was not monetized and it was like private on YouTube. They still gave me a copyright strike, so I had to remove that part of the video, which is crazy because it definitely falls under fair use, but you know, they're a big corporation and they don't give a crap. So I guess we can't watch literally any clips from Pro Motocross, but that's okay because I can still talk about it. I watched Redbud yesterday, and if you haven't watched it yet and you don't want spoilers, just skip past this part. But couple things: Shimoda winning finally. That was long overdue. I believe he hasn't gotten a win since 2023. But I'm super pumped for him. He's been killing it all year, even last year too. I mean, into Supercross and that sort of thing, he was just steady the whole way through, and I've been wanting to see him as a contender. And finally he pulled the win off, and I don't think it was just the case that, oh, Deegan was down, so you know, he had an easier shot. Of course that was definitely like helping, I'm imagining, Deegan not being a factor. However, I will say, no matter what, Shimoda like basically pulled the start in both motos and just pulled away from the rest of the pack. I believe, I don't remember what he finished, but I think it was like, I don't know, like 14 seconds ahead of second place, which might have been Deegan. I can't really remember who got second in the second moto, but anyway, regardless, they kept mentioning in the broadcast that the head of Honda Power Sports or something from Japan came all the way to Redbud for this race. So Joe was really like showing off for the head of the company, which, hell yeah, dude. I respect it. That's pretty sick. I hope they give him a raise. But he deserves it. He's been killing it. He's like probably one of my favorite riders out there. Just super smooth, but freaking fast as well. So anyway, congrats to Shimoda for getting the win. Also, interestingly, we had Yamaha's having a little bit of problems. So Tomac's, I think it was Tomac's bike, blew up in the first 450 moto, and then they did an engine swap on Tomac's bike, Justin Cooper's bike, and Cooper Webb's bike, all in the meantime between motos. And then I believe Deegan's bike also had, it didn't fully blow up, but it started smoking and, you know, showing some signs of struggle there. Interesting stuff. I also want to point out, we did have Anthony Caroli racing on the new Ducati Desmo. It is now officially, like, whatever they call it, homologated. I think they have to sell a certain number of units within the country, I believe, for them to be allowed to race in the Pro Motocross Series. So I guess they did that. They did whatever checks they needed to do in order to make that happen. And so Caroli was able to debut it. It's called the Desmo 450 MX, which is interesting, and it has an interesting design that is different from other bikes, which I want to talk about in a second here. But I just want to point out, Caroli was doing really good, but then I can't remember if it was the first or second moto, one of the 450 motos, the bike basically died. I haven't double checked whether he ended up like getting back on and finishing the moto, but the bike died. It looked I didn't see any smoke, but or like steam or anything, but I don't know. It went kaput, and yeah, so not necessarily the best for your debut of a bike, having it go out in the first time you debut it. I know they have been racing them over in Europe in the MXGPs, so it's not all bad news. But yeah, just kind of interesting first debut here in America, and the bike fails. But with that being said, the Yamahas failed too, and they're one of the most popular bikes out there. So it's just tough conditions at Redbud. The ground is really loamy, it sucks a lot of power out of the bikes, and you're using the clutch a ton. Plus the heat on that day was insane, so there were a lot of factors going into it that is really hard on the bikes. Plus they're just like pro athletes ripping those things to their fullest potential. But yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about the Desmo design. We'll take a little bit of a brief look at the specs. I don't want to go on too long about this. I want to keep it kind of brief, but it is kind of interesting, so I just wanted to check it out and see what we got going on. So let's dive right on in. All right, so here we are on the Ducati Desmo 450 website, and I just want to show you the price at $11,495, and that compares to the other bikes as follows. So on your, I guess, lower end, I guess the lowest end would probably be Suzuki, but the Yamaha 450, the 2025 is actually just under 10 grand. The 2026 is, as you can see, 300 over 10 grand. Then the KTM is 11,299, and the Ducati 11,495. So even what's known to be as a quite expensive bike, the KTM, the Ducati actually tops that, which is interesting. I think we'll talk a little more about it later, but I don't think the average consumer is who this bike is marketed towards. What I do like is on their website, they let you listen to the sound of it, which is kind of cool. So okay. They gonna get on the gas, or are they just chilling? Oh, there we go. Okay, sounds like any other 450. You can hear at the beginning of the audio a little bit of like a whistle almost. And I think that, they say the first motocross bike with desdromic timing, which we're going to talk about in a second. But I'm not sure, but I think that whistling sound might have something to do with that. They talk a little about the vehicle design. It looks like has an aluminum frame. They didn't go with the Austrian sort of steel frame flex model. Interestingly enough, from like this picture, it kind of looks like a Stark Varg. I don't know. And yeah, apparently, I don't know. You can customize it. I don't know much about them. But like I said, they have been racing them over in Europe with the MXGP. We have some pictures of I'm assuming Cairoli. Of course, the Italian doing his thing. I mean, it's definitely a sharp looking bike. It does kind of look like a Stark, which is weird. It's a gas bike, but it looks like an electric bike. I don't know. They say they gained knowledge in MotoGP, and they kind of took it and put it in this bike, which I do know with the valve system on this bike is similar to their street bikes. So that's pretty cool. As far as horsepower goes, 63.5 horsepower, 39.5 foot-pounds of torque. What do we have? Maintenance, service. This is kind of interesting that they include this on the page. Oil change every 15 hours, piston replacement 45 hours, valve clearance check 45 hours, main engine service 90 hours. So that seems pretty standard. I have heard like 10 hours for an oil change on these race bikes. So that was my 250, but yeah, could be a little off, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting they put that on the website. But anyway, let's dive into a little bit about what this sort of desdromic, I don't know. We're going to learn more about the valve system and understand sort of what that all means, how it pertains to this bike. All right, I know. Don't persecute me here, but I do like to use ChatGPT. you can fact check me on these things. I'm not claiming that everything here is 100% fact, but I will say ChatGPT, I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know, like, I know very little about all of these systems. So asking it a question like, how does the Ducati Desmo 450 MX cam design work? I want it to explain it to me in a way that is digestible, understandable, just in a basic way. I don't need to know everything about it. So I just wanted to go through this and kind of like learn with you and explain like what's going on. So it says it has the Desmodromic valve system, which is a hallmark of Ducati engineering, which I've heard they have it on their other bikes, but this is the first time it's sort of been adapted to motocross. So how the cam design works, from my understanding and from reading here, most engines use springs to close the valves, but the Desmodromic system that the Ducati uses, it uses another cam to close the valve. So uses a cam to open it, but also close it, which eliminates valve float at high RPMs, which is, I guess, allows them to rev, higher and more aggressively. So it has 2 cam lobes per valve instead of 1. It has an opening cam lobe and a closing cam lobe, which I got some pictures here from Dirt Bike Magazine, and you can kind of see here there's no springs. This is like the cam thing right here. So I'm not sure which is which, but one of them is opening and one of them is closing, rather than having springs. But it still does have this chain, which is found on other more traditional power sport, like dirt bike cam designs. So that's the gist of it. The advantages, like I said, high RPM stability, so the valves won't float or bounce at high RPMs. Better throttle response because of it's a bit more precise. You don't have the floating, so it's, more precise throttle. And no valve springs to weaken or fail under heat and stress, which that makes sense to me. I never really considered that, but yeah, I guess a spring would probably be like more of a wear item than just a straight up like lobe on a camshaft would. The lobe would be a little more solid. So the complexity is higher, I guess. More intricate, but no spring wear. So that's sort of the benefit. And I asked, what's the cons, right? So it says there's more parts, so 2 cams per valve. So I'm guessing with timing, it would be, it requires more precise valve clearances and skilled mechanics. So that makes sense. There's a lot. I guess it's not that there's like more to go wrong, but it's that the springs don't have to be as precise, whereas another cam has to be way more precise. So I guess there's more involved valve adjustment. So you can't, valve clearance checks and adjustments take longer because you're dealing with 2 rocker arms per valve. See, this is something I've never done, but it seems like it would make the normal task a little bit harder. Potential for higher weight, which whatever. Limited interchangeability, sure. Slower between moto maintenance. So yeah, I guess for pros that would make sense. Like for example, Tomac's bike blew up in between motos. Cairoli's bike might take longer to check the valves and see what's going on. Although if they did have a complete other motor, like they did with Tomac's bike, they could just throw it in. But if you are doing something specific, this is something to think about. This would take longer. And obviously potential higher maintenance costs, which the bike is already expensive as shit anyway. So, this just adds another thing. So, it seems to me like this. That said, Ducati might be targeting factory teams and elite level riders for now. It doesn't seem like they are targeting just your average rider like you or me. If I'm going to go buy a 450, it's not going to be the Desmo. Although it is pretty cool, and it's neat that other brands are getting into the whole motocross thing. This one definitely seems like a more of a high performance, specific use case thing rather than something more, rider friendly or just average rider friendly, right? Like the Yamaha or even the KTM. I've heard the KTMs are more expensive. However, I don't know. It's a little bit more, seems like catered to just the average rider. So what's interesting also, before we stop looking at the Ducati, is I do kind of want to see if they have any electronics. I want to see if they have any like mapping settings or anything like that. So they do have a launch control. They have traction control. And they do have riding mode. So all the electronics are pre-configured in 2 riding modes, available as standard. By adding the Wi-Fi connectivity module, this is the same thing that Triumph makes you do with the Enduro bike. It says the Desmo can be connected to the smartphone. They have an app, and then the user can configure the riding modes as they wish. So it looks like from the factory, you just get 2 standard ones, and then if you want to add the Wi-Fi connectivity module, which I'm sure that's not cheap whatsoever. So anyway, that's the Ducati Desmo. Kind of interesting. They are sort of innovating in the motocross field, although this design is used on their street bikes as well. But yeah, I don't know, just kind of neat, something we don't see too often. And I don't know, just, yeah, something to think about. It'll be interesting to see if they survive, or if, you know, kind of what happens to them as time goes on, if they become very popular, or if they just kind of remain as sort of like a one-off weird bike. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Let me know what you think as the future of the Ducati. All right, and now this is the Q&A portion of the show. I wanted to start off with a comment I got on TikTok, and it was from crazy_fourwheeler.girl. She said, opinion on eyelashes on four-wheeler. I just want to say I'm not like the biggest quad guy. I'm not really into them. I've tried to ride them and they freak me out. I feel like I'm always going to roll them. But I must say I'm digging the eyelashes. I'm definitely digging the eyelashes on the quad. Looks pretty cool, especially on this one. I think it fits. I've seen eyelashes on cars before. I think it takes a certain type of person to pull those off. Not necessarily something I would do. However, on this particular quad, if I had this quad in my garage, I would certainly put eyelashes on it as well. It looks pretty freaking dope, I must say. So that was the first question I got. But let's dive into some more questions now. All right, so the next question comes from someone also on TikTok. They said, hey dude, everyone tells me that I should get a trail bike for my first bike, but I really want a 250 race bike. My girlfriend has a YZ250, and considering I can't find any trail bikes used, I'm planning on getting a YZ250 too. I don't want to die on it, but is it possible for a first bike? If so, what do I need to do? So, I don't know anything about like how old you are, how tall you are, that sort of thing. But I'm assuming you know what a YZ250 is, and if you can fit on it, like size-wise, that's one thing. If you can't fit on the YZ250, I would not recommend getting it as a first bike. I would look for literally anything else, anything smaller than that. A 250 two-stroke is a powerful bike, and if you can't touch the ground on it, it's just not going to be fun for you at all. Like I guarantee you will have no fun. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Is it the right choice? In my opinion, no. However, there are, I guess, some applications where it would be okay. But I struggle to find applications where that would actually make sense. It's mainly just a thing of how much do you want, are you okay with struggling? So the bikes, the YZ250 is a very hard-hitting two-stroke bike. It has a lot of power. It's a motocross bike, so it's not really designed for beginners at all. It's not something like the Beta, like X Trainer. Those bikes are sort of like detuned two-strokes. They're often a lot more beginner friendly. Even something like I don't know, like the Enduro model of a 252 stroke, like for example, like a Husqvarna or KTM Enduro model, those bikes are even going to be better for a beginner than the motocross like YZ252 stroke. The reason I say that is because on the YZ250, the motocross version, the power band is gonna punch a lot more. Like the moment at which the power band hits on that bike is very intense, versus on the enduro or cross country 252 strokes, the moment where the power band hits is kind of more like drawn out or like spread out. It's a lot wider. So yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't be what I would go for. I would much rather be on like a 125 or like a 200 maybe. If you are like stuck on getting a big bike, if you really can't find any trail bikes in your area, like I understand that, but I would definitely recommend you go for more like something like a, if you have to do a big bore two stroke, do like an enduro model where the power is a lot more tame. I would not go for something like a motocross, YZ250. Yeah, so I guess the real answer is no. I don't recommend that. Sorry. Next question I got from Instagram says, ever been to Mapleshade MX? Actually, yes. One of my first races on my YZ125, I believe it was the race before the one at Pleasure Valley where I had that big crash. That was actually at Mapleshade. I went there once. I remember they put a ton of like grass clippings down on the ground, on the track to kind of like make the soil softer. I believe they put some like sawdust down too. I don't know. From what I remember, I don't remember much, but it was like a decent track. Pretty fun, nothing too crazy. But yeah, I have been there. Another question from Instagram says, what's a thing you wish wasn't in the moto community? That's a great question. One of the things I wish wasn't in the moto community is probably just I made a video about it recently called something like why dirt biking won't survive or something like that. And it talked a lot about like the sort of toxicity in the moto community. And I hate to like lump people together, but I've noticed this more and more that I've moved to like more enduro off-road riding. The off-road enduro riders are like way friendlier. Once again, I'm definitely generalizing here. Not everyone is like this. There's certainly nice people that ride motocross, but from my experience, it seems like people that ride motocross are like mortal enemies to one another. Like, you pull up to the line and like, yeah, you might say like, good luck, buddy, or whatever, but it's not as much of a camaraderie thing, at least in my experience. Now, mileage may vary. Other people might have very tight-knit friend groups in motocross, but it seems to me like it's a very much like competitive, I want to beat you, I don't really want to be your friend type atmosphere. Whereas off-road, even people in the same class as you, it seems like they all want to be friends with you. Super chill. Everyone's there just to have a good time, at least for like hair scramble races and things. I've even heard of like in hard enduro events, other riders like literally helping another rider up a steep, like completely stopping, getting off their bike and helping someone up a steep hill climb section. And then the other rider turning around and helping that person up as well. Like that is just unheard of in moto. Obviously in moto, it's a lot more fast paced and stuff, but in motocross way more often, I've seen people just like being very rude to new riders, calling them squids, like making fun of the gear they wear and stuff like that. Just overall a much more toxic thing. Or like, this is also on the internet too, but like just the thing of like, for instance, if I put out a video talking about, proper technique or something, right, that I've heard somewhere, and that's like, I say, that's what I'm like practicing, right? This is what I try to do when I go out and train. Then someone in the comments will be like, bro, you're not even fast. You suck. You're slow. Like, why should I listen to advice from you? And it's like, that's basically I guess it's like an ad hominem attack, right? You're just attacking the person rather than attacking their argument. And one time a like B-level rider that he had pictures of, like, he went to Loretta Lynn's on his profile. He said that to me in a comment, and I was just like, damn, dude, like, here I am, just an average rider, just like talking about tips that I've gotten from like pro coaches and stuff, like AJ Catanzaro, Shane Watts, like people online that are seasoned professionals giving their advice on technique and that sort of thing. And I'm just like relaying this advice that I am currently working on myself to try to get better. I never claimed to be a pro. I never claimed to be super good. I never claimed to be fast. I'm like an average rider. And to have someone who, like, one of my goals in life is to make it to Loretta Lynn's one day. That's a huge accomplishment. And to make it in B class, like C class getting to Loretta's, I mean, you think that's a novice class? C class going to Loretta's is fierce, man. So making it to Loretta's in B class, you're a really good rider. And when I got that comment from that kid, I was just like, man, like, you're a very talented rider. Why are you punching down at someone less experienced? I don't really understand that. I don't know why that happens. And it seems like it happens way more often in the motocross community than it does in the off-road community. So I wish that's one thing I wish was out of the moto community, because that just really bugs me. So yeah, I think that's my answer. So anyway, next question, how hard is it to replace a burned out clutch, and can I do it with no experience, just a YouTube video? So luckily, I personally have only ever experienced one burnt out clutch. It's a really weird feeling. The bike's clutch just all of a sudden gives out, and it feels like it can't really, it won't move. It just can't like go into gear. The clutch is kind of just like stuck slipping, if that makes sense. It was on my CR85 way back in the day. My dad helped me change it. He did most of the work. Like I said, I'm not very mechanically inclined when it comes to dirt bikes. Also never really been that interested in it. Luckily, I have a bunch of people around me that are very mechanically inclined, and that's what they like to do. So they oftentimes help me out a lot. But with that being said, to answer your question, can you do like a clutch replace with like zero experience? Yeah, totally. Luckily, just working on dirt bikes in general doesn't require a lot of tools. I think the only thing you might need other than just like a socket set, like a metric socket set, would be maybe some like funnels, I guess, for like the fluid. And, you know, forgive me if I'm wrong, because this has been a long time since I've done this, but also just like a clutch puller. You might not even need that, honestly. I think it's fairly easy to get the clutch plates out just by hand. But yeah, a YouTube video, use ChatGPT. I know it's not perfect, but it works really well at like asking it what different parts are if you don't know what they are. Cross-reference your manual, ChatGPT, and YouTube, and you'll be good to go. As long as you have patience and like some time to figure it out, you can definitely do it with little to no experience. It's not an extremely difficult job. Another person from Instagram asked, have you ever thought about owning a European bike? Yeah, definitely. Right now I'm looking at sort of getting a new bike, and I'm not really writing any brands off the table. I've only ever had Japanese bikes. However, I would be down to get like a KTM or a Husqvarna, or maybe an Italian bike like a Beta, something like that. I'm really not taking anything off the table. I don't really care what country the brand comes from. Just kind of more looking at specifications and sort of seeing what bike fits the type of riding I'm doing. Next question is from YouTube, and I got similar questions quite a bit. It seems like people do these sort of joke posts, but I actually have a serious answer to this. They ask, low key, when I wipe with wet wipes first, I get hella crap off in one wipe, but it's nasty. But it's kind of nasty when I use toilet paper. I get less off, but it's more clean. I said wet wipe gang all day. I know this is kind of a weird topic, but it's kind of strange how often I get this comment whenever I ask about if you have questions. But yeah, I'm wet wipe gang all day. If you're using toilet paper, you know, by all means. I usually hit it with the one little thing of toilet paper first, and then I finish up with the wet wipes, but that's just me. So anyway, thanks for that riveting question. next question also comes from YouTube. Now this is an example of a good bike question. So every time I've been asking you guys for questions, you keep asking me the same thing, which is, I understand it's frustrating, but you guys keep asking me the same bike questions like, hey, I'm 13 years old, I'm 5'6", what bike should I get? And while I would love to answer everyone's bike question, first off, I get way too many of them and I just can't respond to everyone. So thank you for those of you who replied to those people and sort of help them out in the comments, because I just physically can't do it. I can't reply to everyone. But I just want you to know, if you're asking a bike question, I'm going to need to know more information than just, you know, what your height and weight is and like your age or whatever. That tells me some of it, but that doesn't tell me everything. So in order to make a bike decision, I kind of need to know a lot more about you. Like, yes, your size for sure, and like how old you are, also how much experience previously you have on dirt bikes, also like what type of riding you plan on doing, what the terrain near you is like. That all plays a big factor. So this is an example of an actual good bike question that I am happy to answer. But for those ones that are just like, you know, I'm 5'6", is a 250F good for me? Like, I don't know, dude. I need more information than that. So anyway, this question says, I'm nervous about which bike to buy. I'm coming back to riding after 20 years off. I'm a downhill mountain biker, snowboarder. I race BMX and I grew up racing two strokes. I'm 45, weigh about 250 with all the gear on. And I am the furthest thing from competent mechanically. I was looking at older two-stroke 250s, 1990s to 2004-ish YZ, CR, RM, or KX. I will only be doing trail riding, possibly a hare scramble once I get used to the bike and feel comfortable again. I keep hearing to stay away from four strokes because I'm not a mechanic. I also do not have a lot of cash for repairs and upgrades. I have around $3K to spend. What's your opinion on what I should look for? 125, 250, two-stroke, or four-stroke? I love the videos. Keep up the great work. Thank you in advance. Okay, so this is a great question. You give me a lot of things to go off of, and I can kind of help you narrow down your choice. Although I will say, unfortunately, with your budget, it's definitely going to be kind of difficult. So that $3,000, I'm not sure if you mean you have $3,000 in total just to buy a bike, or you have $3,000 like to put into parts. If you have it to put into parts and you got money to buy the bike, that's great. You're gonna be fine. But if that's just for your bike, yeah, you're definitely gonna have to look in that older, you know, late 90s to early 2000s market to get a bike for that price, especially a 252 stroke. The thing people are saying about four strokes, even though you're not mechanically inclined, I think it's valid to say that you should probably avoid older four strokes. Like, I would avoid carbureted old four strokes, simply because they have a lot less reliability. The newer four strokes, like I would say maybe like 2016 and up, as far as maintenance goes, really all you got to do is change the oil regularly. At a certain amount of hours, you'll have to change the top end, which is the same as on a two-stroke. And then you just got to check the valve clearance. Even though you're not like mechanically inclined, if you know how to rebuild a top end on a two-stroke, you can figure out how to check the valve clearances. It's not that much more difficult. So if you're looking at those older four strokes, like late 90s to early 2000s, yes, I would probably avoid those. But if you're looking at like later 2000s to more modern four strokes, which by the way, you're not going to be able to find for under 3,000 most likely. Although as far as maintenance goes, I would say you'll be fine. If you're used to riding two strokes though, and you're comfortable on like a 252 stroke, just go for one of those. Get an old one. I think that's fine. If you have tons of experience, you also, you know, race BMX and downhill mountain bike and stuff. Like, holy shit, did you just see that? I did like a 360 backflip off that jump and landed it. Anyway, yeah, if you have that kind of experience, you'll be fine on the two-stroke. It's not like you're coming at it from a complete beginner. I guess when I say two-stroke, I mean the 250 two-stroke. So yeah, I mean, if that's what you're used to, that bike is going to be way better for trail riding than like a 125 would be. If you can, maybe go for an Enduro model, like maybe one of the old KTM cross country or Enduro model 252 strokes or something like that, like that's comparable. But yeah, I think that would be a good option for you based on what you've said. Next question also comes from YouTube. It says, so I don't ride very much anymore because I've been picking up work, but I don't want to stop riding. What should I do? This is tough. I understand having, other obligations in life and then not having as much time to ride or do any hobby for that matter. And I understand how that can be really stressful. But if you want to keep your hobby going, you don't want to stop riding, I would say, I guess there's a couple things. First off, you can't be hard on yourself. You can't impose some sort of crazy amount of riding that you have to do. If you're working a lot and you're tired and you need time to rest and riding dirt bikes is not fueling for you, don't force yourself to do it, because if you do that, you're just going to get burnt out and you're never going to want to ride. So actually, oddly, the solution to riding more and making sure you still ride is maybe taking a break whenever you feel like you need to. With that being said, though, like, say, I don't know when you work. You could work nights, you could work during the day, who knows? But if you work during the day and it gets dark and you don't have time to ride in the evening, I'm kind of interested in this. I want to do this in the future, but get a headlamp. Or a helmet, like a helmet light. I know like Oxbow makes some good helmet lights, and put a headlight on your bike and ride at night. If you have like riding area trails around nearby, try to do some night riding. Obviously it's not feasible for everyone because you might be in a more populated area, and if you start riding at night, you might piss off your neighbors, that sort of thing. Or maybe you just ride motocross and obviously they're not going to have tracks open at night for you to ride. But if you just do trail riding, yeah, I mean, if you have some buddies, invest in some of those lights and try it out. I'm really interested to try that out in the future. So that's an idea, but otherwise I would say just don't be too hard on yourself. Otherwise you'll get burnt out. So yeah, sometimes it's counterintuitive, but maybe taking time off will actually help you continue to ride further into the future. Oh, I gotta pause. Okay. Next question is, should I buy a dual sport and deal with it being slow, or should I buy a fast bike and make it street legal? So this all also depends on sort of what you like to do and what you want to get out of it. If you really like mechanics and you like modifying a bike and you really want a bike that's going to be like more speed oriented, first off, I don't know if you want an actual bike that will be able to ride off-road, or if you're just saying dual sport because you want something that's street legal. If you want just a straight up Super Moto that you only ride on the street with like street tires, I would, well, if you're okay with doing like mechanical work and that sort of thing, I would probably recommend just buying like a race 450 and converting it to Super Moto. If you want more information on that, you should follow my buddy Lomoto, Lomoto, on Instagram and YouTube. He also has a TikTok, but he has a Supermoto build and he's built tons of Supermotos. So if you have any questions about building a Supermoto from a motocross bike, definitely reach out to him, Lomoto, and ask him sort of like what goes into that. But if you don't find yourself being very mechanically inclined and you don't get enjoyment out of like building bikes, I would just go for the dual sport. Honestly, unless you strictly want to do fast paced like road riding, then I would probably get a street bike, not a dual sport. But if you want it to be capable off road, but you also want it to be, like on road, I guess maybe you're looking at doing enduro and you just want a bike that can ride from trail to trail. Oh, this is hard to answer because I don't have a lot of information. Okay, so I guess there's two other ways. If you want to ride a lot of single track and enduro, and you just want a bike that you can transport between trails, then I would probably go for like a legit enduro bike, like an enduro, I guess you'd call a race bike, or like a full enduro bike, not a dual sport, and street legal that, like get that plated. But if you're just looking for something casual and you do like back road riding and that sort of thing, but you just want to do like casual, super chill trail riding, you don't want to do anything like super intense, then you can just get like a pre-built dual sport. It's kind of hard because there's so many different variations of the dual sports and enduro bikes, and without having information on what type of riding you want to do, it's kind of hard for me to pick a bike for you, but I guess that's the stuff you would want to be thinking about. Next question also comes from YouTube. What's your opinion on the Yamaha 125 DT1 1969, also known as my dirt bike? So nice. Shout out to you for having a vintage bike like that. My opinions on that bike, I've never ridden one. I don't know much about that specific bike, but I have I want to say it's a 1972 or 1973 DT2 250, and then I also have a LT 100. It's a purple Yamaha from like the same sort of time frame. Those bikes are awesome. They're really cool, especially if they're restored. And like I said, I go to that AMA Vintage Motorcycle Days every year, so it's really neat to see all the old bikes. And if that's what you got, it's sick, dude. Like, pretty cool bikes, and it's really neat to see how the technology has changed. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty badass that you have one of those old bikes. Yeah, me too. Next question is, are there any upgrades / mods that you have to have for trail / enduro, and what about for motocross? So pretty simply, I think the mods you need for enduro riding are, you don't have to go too crazy, but I feel like you should definitely have handguards, whether they're full wraparound or just the plastic ones. I think you should have something. Then I think you should have a skid plate to protect the underside of your bike, because, you know, hitting a rock and screwing something up, not fun. So get protection for that. I think that's really like the main thing. Oh, I guess then an oversized tank would be like the next thing you probably want. Other than that, that's pretty much it. You can always add more protection parts, like disc, like brake disc covers, or like exhaust guards and stuff like that. But I would say the essentials are hand guards and a skid plate, and then the third thing would be like an oversized tank. But yeah, that's pretty much for enduro. For motocross, you kind of just want to take all that stuff off if you can afford it. Make your bike as light as possible. I would still run hand guards now, but in the past I didn't used to do that. But yeah, I guess just make the bike as light as possible. So if it has any of those extra parts and you want to make it more suited for motocross, take those things off. Next question. Why am I afraid of things like jumping or riding fast, and how can I overcome my fear? So the reason you're afraid of that stuff is kind of natural. I feel like our bodies have self-preservation in them, and jumping is a very unnatural. Jumping a dirt bike, flying through the sky on a couple 100-pound machine, going pretty fast speeds, is very unnatural. So it's understandable that you would have fear of jumping and riding fast, because that's just not what we're designed to do as humans. But the best way you overcome those fears is actually pretty simple. It's gradually increasing what you do and sort of like desensitizing yourself over time gradually. So don't start off with like a huge jump. If you want to get good at jumping, start off with something like this, like a little roller. You're not going to start off with clearing a 100-foot triple. You're going to start hitting just like a tabletop like this, for example, and you're probably not going to clear it the whole way. You're probably going to only you know, land halfway across or something like that. So start small, work your way up, do it a lot until you get comfortable at one stage, and then move up. And that's the same with speed. If you try to go too fast without having the skills to back it up, you're just going to crash. So it's better to go slow at first and learn the fundamentals and be able to control the bike at slow speeds, so that whenever you pick up speed, you have those fundamentals sort of like instinctually locked in. So yeah, it's totally natural to have fear of that, but just, you know, keep that in mind. Gradually work your way up. Next, we got a question from Patreon, and that was, in your opinion, why do you think Suzuki hasn't updated their dirt bike line in years and hasn't made like a cross-country dirt bike? So interesting. I don't know. It does seem like Suzuki hasn't been doing anything in the motocross sort of like off-road line of things. They don't seem to have any sort of enduro bikes or that sort of thing. I guess the closest thing would be like maybe the enduro model of the DRZ 400, but they did away with that and they came out with the DRZ 4S or whatever, which is the upgraded new model of the DRZ 400. They also came out with like an adventure bike, the V-Strom or whatever it is. But yeah, interestingly enough, they have not done many advancements in the off-road sort of like motocross enduro realm of things. They do still have their motocross bikes. And I guess my opinion on why they are doing that is, I'm assuming either their finances aren't that hot, that's one possibility, or they are more focused on some other industry. So whether that's, maybe it's street bikes, I don't know much about their other sort of sides of things. Maybe their adventure bike business side of things is booming. Clearly they updated the DRZ 400, so that must have been a really popular bike. I see why it was. I had one too. So I'm guessing that as a company, they're just focused way more on that side of things. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It is strange that they haven't really updated their motocross bikes in years and years. But I don't know. I would just have to assume that it's because they're making more money elsewhere, or their finances are just bad, in which case that kind of makes sense. Next question is kind of like a two-piece from Patreon as well. The person asks, question 1, what exactly is a real dirt bike? And what exactly is the line between a dirt bike and a pit bike? So I guess I'll answer that question first, and then they have another question. So what exactly is a real dirt bike? This is a very hard question. And then I guess the easier question is, what is the line between a dirt bike and a pit bike? So I would say a pit bike is a small... I just ran out of gas, I think. Yeah, I did. Okay, 1 second. So anyway, I would say a pit bike is a small... Actually, never mind. I always forget how to do this. 1 second. Okay, so I would say a pit bike is basically a small dirt bike. It's not a full-size dirt bike. So the most iconic pit bike is probably, at this point right now, is probably a 110, which is a bike designed for kids. Very small chassis, but when an adult rides it around, it's considered a pit bike because it's what you would use as like a transport vehicle through the pits at like a racetrack. Small, quiet, easy to just putt around slowly. That's why like what I would consider trail bikes oftentimes fit in the pit bike category. But I would say something like the CRF 250F is probably not a pit bike. I would describe it as a big pit bike, but I would actually qualify it as like a trail bike, not a pit bike, even though it has a lot of similar characteristics to a pit bike. I think anything smaller than like a 140 maybe is probably would be okay to consider a pit bike. But I guess it just depends person to person. Now, what would you consider a real dirt bike? So this question is kind of interesting because I think it varies. Obviously, I think motocross bikes, enduro bikes, even the even the like CRF 250F I would consider a real dirt bike. Although it's not a race bike, it's a dirt bike. Even kids bikes too. Like I think pit bikes would be classified as real dirt bikes too. My definition of real dirt bike is pretty broad. I think it would include dual sports, although they're like a separate subcategory. And I think the same for pit bikes. They're real dirt bikes, but they're a separate subcategory. Just like youth-sized bikes. Like as an adult, I'm not going to be looking seriously at getting like a 65, but a kid would definitely consider a 65 a real dirt bike. So it's all arbitrary. Is an adventure bike a real dirt bike? Well, you have people like Pol Terrace, I think that's his name, absolutely shredding them, and he rides it like a dirt bike. Now it's huge, it's bulky, it's clunky, but you know, to him, it's a real dirt bike. It's an adventure bike, so whether you want to call it a dirt bike or a motorcycle, that's kind of like a vague line. And then dual sports also kind of fall like in between. I think in some applications you would call them a dirt bike, in some applications you might just call it something separate like a dual sport, but all in all it's pretty much a dirt bike. Even supermotos I would consider. I get a lot of comments on my Instagram post about comparing my DRZ 400 supermoto, saying it's a street bike, and then comparing it to how dirt bikes are and how they're meant to be crashed. So I would put an asterisk beside that. Yes, it is still kind of sort of on the bones of a dirt bike, but it's technically something different. It's like a dual sport, a street bike. Oftentimes I think you'll find that a lot of dual sports like the DRZ 400 and some of the other dual sports are not actually on the same frame as the more conventional dirt bikes are. They're sometimes on like a trellis frame or just a different frame altogether. And sometimes they'll have different engines, like the CRF 300L has the CBR 300 engine in it. So that's a street bike engine. I don't know. You can get a little lost in the weeds here on this. I guess it's a gray area. I don't have a solid answer for you, and I wish I did. But yeah, there's nuance to that. Next question is, could carbureted bikes with kickstarts and no battery like most older bikes be considered more reliable than most newer bikes with their complex electronics, potentially adding weight and additional complexity? Okay. So I see where you're coming from. I think I don't necessarily agree with it though. I think the new bikes, although they are more complex, I don't think that necessarily makes them less reliable. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a mechanic. I haven't looked at the data on it. But to me, when I'm, for instance, I'll ride my CRF 250F, which has fuel injection, which is more complex than a carbureted bike. And it has electric start and no kickstart, plus a battery that could die. Technically more complex than my YZ125. However, I find that the more complex CRF 250F is far more reliable than my carbureted YZ125, which gets flooded all the time because I forget to turn the gas off when I just lean it over a little bit. It's a lot older. I run into more just issues because of its age. So in my opinion, no, I kind of disagree, actually. I think newer bikes, although yes, they're more complex, I think they're more reliable. I think like a lot of people make the argument like, oh, if your carburetor goes, you can just easily take it off the bike and clean it. But if your electronic fuel injection system goes, you're not going to know how to fix it, and you have to replace the whole unit. Yes, I do see that, but when have you heard of a fuel injection system going? Like, that's so rare, and way more often I hear of like carb issues and like them not being jetted right. I hear of that so much more than I hear of somebody's EFI going out and having to replace their fuel injection module. Like I just don't hear of that. And that leads me to believe that while yes, it's more complex, it's not less reliable. So yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts? I know a lot of people think the other way, like more simpler, more just simple mechanics equals more reliable. I think there is merit to that. I'm not saying it's completely wrong, but I just think the newer bikes are built with reliability in mind. And I think while yes, they're more complex, they're still kind of more reliable. Put it this way, I would much rather have a brand new bike with all the bells and whistles, and I would not be worried about maintenance and stuff on it, as I would having an old 10-year-old clapped out YZ125 with none of those bells and whistles. That gives me way more anxiety and pisses me off more than a brand new bike with bells and whistles and stuff on it. So that's my opinion on that. And then last question, kind of interesting, from Instagram. What do you think of Honda's new CRF 300F coming out in 2026? So I heard rumors of this. I saw that the 250F was kind of axed from the lineup, which I thought was very interesting. And then that immediately led me to believe they're probably coming out with some bike to compete with Kawasaki's KLX 300R. I think the 250F was immensely popular, as with, you know, it has been with all the growth on my channel of it. So I could totally see them trying to ride that wave and making something similar to like the KLX 300R, which I think is what they're doing. So we might see the 300F be fuel injected. We also might see it with better suspension, which I really hope they do. If they do that, they're basically fixing the major complaints we had with the CRF 250F, and I'm so here for it. I'm so excited. I would love to try one. So if you guys want to make that happen, comment on Honda's page, tag me, tell them that they should give Soup Moto a demo bike to review. Whatever, reach out. I don't care what you do. Just nag Honda. Tell Honda you want to see Soup Moto do videos about this bike, because I'm really excited for it. I think it'd be really interesting to compare it to the 250F. But yeah, I don't know. I'm super excited. Now, to be fair, I don't know. I've seen like rumors. I've seen like little Instagram clips here and there of like it available in other countries or something like that. I haven't done really any research or looked into it. So this could, I honestly don't know. I didn't see any press releases. I didn't really look into it much more than just the rumors I've heard. So I could be completely wrong. But anyway, that's my speculation. That's what I think. And I'm very excited for it. So thank you all for watching. That's it for today's show. I hit about the same time as I did on last episode, so I think I'm getting a little better at this. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as right back here on Patreon for next week's Secret Show. Please leave feedback in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think about the Secret Show. I'd love to get more ideas. I want this to be your show just as much as it is mine. So if you have ideas, questions, comments, feedback, I'd love to hear it. Please drop it in the comments below. I think that's all. I'll see you guys next time.